Being your authentic self is something that can transform your sales if you do it right. And on this episode, we're going to tell you exactly how you can do this. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. On this episode today, we have an amazing guest. His name is Carl Sajous. Carl and I connected about authenticity and how you as a sales rep can show up. But sometimes we just use the word authentic in a buzzword manner or not even with the real concept of understanding what we mean by authenticity. Carl, share with us how he's doing this and how it's working for him and his team, not only to help them build pipe, but specifically to be able to close more opportunities. And I'm digging their strategy. He's going to break down what's going on. If this is your first time listening to our podcast, or if this is your first time watching one of our videos, go ahead and subscribe, and we'll notify you every time we have a piece of new content. As we dive in today, you'll see why he believes so strongly in authenticity and how authenticity can help you out when it comes towards performing much better. You're going to love it. Let's dive in. Carl, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to this. And one of the things I like about this, not only the fact that you come highly recommended, and also the topic is totally right up the alley. I feel that benefits our sales team, but you live that thing. You're authentic in all that you do, man. So
Yes, sir.
I'm really looking forward to this. I bragged about you a little bit in a teaser there as we were coming into the episode. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do, man?
Yeah, I'm the director of sales for an HR tech company, SaaS company, Fringe. It's a lifestyle benefits marketplace that allows employees to select their own perks and benefits that align with their own day-to-day lives. And so really meeting with a lot of HR executive folks, senior leadership teams that are really looking to enhance their overall employee experience, engage employees, retain employees, and things of that nature. Residing here in Richmond, Virginia, of course. And knocking it out with a team that's here.
Pretty dope. Well, listen, we talked a little bit before this episode, and you kind of gave me some ideas about what what's working right now, what has worked for you when it comes to this concept of showing up authentically. Many people right now in the day and age that we're living in are so enamored by AI, which I'm one of them, and there's a lot of tools that can help us to be able to make life easier. And with that, we lose a sense of our authenticity of who we are, showing up and really genuinely connecting with folks. What's some of the challenges you're seeing right now when it comes to authenticity?
Yeah, I mean, the convenience of everything really tries to make it the authenticity kind of go by the wayside. But in fact, I like to use AI on the flip side, and like ChatGPT, for example, I use that as a tool to know what not to say. Right? I think a lot of times when we standardize a lot of these offerings, it's a sea of sameness, as I like to call it. But if I know kind of what's standard and what people are usually saying, I'm probably going to go here so that my message resonates better. So I like to use it not for as a way to use something for myself, for my own talk track, my own language, but also to kind of really figure out what is the world saying and what can I say that's a little bit different than that.
That's interesting, and I think this cool parts with the cool part about all of that is just how it doesn't have to be this or that, but this and that, right? You're showing up authentically, but you're getting that intel from AI to be able to do so. When it comes to selling, we know that this is an important factor, the authenticity of just being your genuine self. Can you just define that for me? Because I don't want to make it just another buzzword that we toss out. What does it mean to you to be genuinely authentic?
Yeah. Showing up is like who you are. There's like no cutting corners to being honest. If something might be outside of the budget, saying it probably is going to be outside the budget, right? I mean, it's really just being who you are and showing up every conversation as who you are. And the reason why I feel like that's the case is because I like to kind of view it as if I were to go into a restaurant and were to see somebody there. If I'm somebody different than who I was on a call, for example, we might not mesh well in person, but who I am in person is who I am on Zoom. And so I feel like that actually benefits my entire sales process because at that point, it's no longer a transaction. It's all about the relationship. And for me, the transaction is secondary to what's primary, which is relationship.
And I think you're go back to this idea of as well. And I'm just gonna call myself out. When I first started doing B2B outreach, B2B sales, I felt like I had to be somebody else, Carl. Like I felt like I had to be, and I don't know if it was like there came a point where I realized I can be myself, but then what I what still was the underlining idea was that I need to be professional. Now I'm not saying that I need to just show up to a thing and in my underwears or a t-shirt on the Zoom call or whatever, but it's just this idea of like I can be Donald and I can be professional. And I think that's the authentic self that I had challenges with was I felt like this professional Donald had to behave a certain way. So when I did connect with somebody on LinkedIn per se, and then I try to articulate that conversation, or if I met them in person, it felt like there was three different people that they were talking to. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. I mean, and I think there are things to consider and think about when doing outreach, right?
Yeah.
I traditionally speaking don't look like the normal sales person, and
Right.
so the thing is, I can't lead in certain ways that maybe others can, maybe with video or maybe some things like that, where their appearance won't negatively impact their success on a call. And so you have to be very, very creative and unique in your approach, and that's where authenticity comes into play because they can read through that. I always say that the buyer today is the smartest buyer there's ever been because everything
Mhm.
today is a transaction. The cable service you have, the cell phone you have, the apps you use, the social media you use, all those things are just different transactions. And so within that, what can we do to separate ourselves from all of those transactions that are happening? And I think again, being authentic allows me to do that, and doing it in a meaningful way.
How do you build a relationship though, Carl? Like that's one of the notes I have down here. We want to build those relationships and build the authentic relationship. Be yourself, be you. How do you go about doing this still? Give me some tactical things I can use or our sellers can use listening to this.
Yeah. I think keeping it simple, right? They always say you have like two ears, one mouth. Use them, in that proportion, right? Like really sitting and listening. Again, it's attention to detail. There's a difference between listening and just hearing something, right? And so really intentively listening and feeding back what you hear to the person you're speaking to again make sure that there's a commonality or some alignment there. And so listening for me is primary, right? Where I just really internalize what what is on their mind, but then also I create what that problem is, right? So again, when I relate it back to them and say, like, it sounds like you're looking to solve this or you're looking to solve for that. And then being honest and being transparent about the relationship building, it's almost like just giving advice to a friend. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, really. You created a problem, right? And now I have a solution that can just help a friend. And that's kind of how I view it. So it's again less about the transaction and more about what can I do to help a friend solve a problem that they're currently going through, like I would for anybody else in my personal life as well as my professional life.
So go back to this listening component. Like, what do you listen for? Is there certain things you listen for, or is it how do I best actively listen? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, because we'll hear that listen, become a better listener. But what makes me a better listener? And I know you mentioned attention to detail. If there's an example you have, like that'll be awesome. We can maybe dive into that of something that you've heard or whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I try to not go in with a prescribed way to listen, right?
Gotcha.
And I think because of that, that allows me to listen more intently, right? If I go in and I'm listening for a certain thing, I might mishear something that is told to me. So really, I just go in with, no preconceived notions. No, I'm not trying to respond while you're sharing information. And I'm really, truly just listening. Like some people would in my life will say, man, like you seem like you're disinterested. And it's not even that. I really just don't want to skew anybody but in any way. It's really just again listening and taking in the information. And then again, and feeding it back, it's really trying to place it in a way that's manageable. Right. And so if we're talking in business transactions and I know that there's a solution that I have, then I try to like listen for what the pain points are and align them with what our product and service provides a solution for, and just kind of categorize it because people will share the things that they're frustrated on, right? So we're in the HR space. A
Yeah.
lot of HR professionals struggle with time and distributing their different products and services to their team members and things of that nature. And if we can kind of make that easy for them, right? That's something I'm going to categorize. And I'm going to say, oh, wow, well, it sounds like you're trying to save time. It sounds like you're overwhelmed and things like that. Well, then my solution is going to categorize it in a way that helps save time, because that's what they're ultimately looking to do.
So it's going, yeah, no preconceived notion, but listening in a way that you can best help, and obviously how you can tie this back to something they have. So let me just tell you, for instance, I'm making this up. I don't know, you're offering too much. I guess benefits. So I might say, yeah, we have a thriving sales team, and company has been small, and now we're finally growing, and I want to give something back to my team members, um, and to best help them, prepare to be successful in their future. So that's what I'm trying to get from this call today. Is there anything in there that you would listen for that you would then follow up with me on or go deeper on?
I would just ask, well, why is that important to you?
Ooh, okay. All right. Yeah.
And again, like we all within a transaction, there's a buyer and a seller, but be
Yeah.
underneath that, the undertow is that we're all humans, right? And so like we all have jobs to do, but like
Yeah.
why is it important to you? So like when I have a champion and an opportunity, I want to make sure that when I'm not there, they're advocating for it just as much, if not more, than I am. And so
Yeah.
when I am out of the room, or when we're preparing to not be in the room, it's like, well, what are you going to be talking about? Right? Like I just told you everything that we do, the problems it solves, how we're going to do it, all the things. But when I'm not there and you're talking to your team, like what are you even going to talk about? And
Yeah.
that's just a real conversation, right? Like it's like not a buyer and a seller. It's just like, okay, friend of mine. Like when you're going to go share this with the executive leadership team, what are you going to then talk about? And that's where we start to prepare them. So it's really just understanding the person underneath of the roles that they serve, right? And so and again, finding that common thread and that commonality, making sure again relationship is primary, and the transaction is secondary.
Fantastic, man. Let's go into the next one. You had a story in which you built. I guess go back into that. I want to just something just hit me real quick as we were talking now, or bridging the gap here. But when you mentioned, tell me a little bit, why is that important to me? Can you just fine tune how does that, or why does that indicate help with building relationship? You kind of talk about how does help you when you're not in a room. How would that help to build relationship with
Yeah.
me? So
Yeah. Listening deeper helps build the relationship because that person feels heard, right? They feel prepared in going into those conversations. They know that if you care deeply about them, you're not going to have them looking silly in front of their executive leadership team for a
mm,
project that they've been working on. And so when you really uncover what's meaningful to them and really uncover the reasons why they want to do these things, and you help prepare them for that conversation, they just feel like you're in it with them, and you're not just like sending them away to do something else. You're in partnership with them in creating this solution for what they're looking for.
and the cool thing about that too is just like you're invested with me. And what I think of that relationship is like, bro, I know Carl's got my back. So if I need to tap him to come and help me with this, or I need to hit him on an email, Carl, I'm going into this meeting, prep for this. What, is there anything else? It's that is strong relationship. And that's the on an optimal outcome. And say we sign up and we go, become your partner or a business, we do business together. But let's go to the other side. I know you had a story, an
Yeah.
experience where you built relationship with someone. However, it didn't turn out into a deal with that person right now.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that?
Yeah, the reason why the deal and the transaction, the result of the transaction, is not primary to me is because there's going to be external factors that can impact the deal that are just above and beyond my control. The thing I can control is how I show up for that person that I'm on the other end of the line or the other end
Mm,
of that transaction with or for. And so, again, going into that conversation or that deal, we were really building rapport, and we were working on this deal for 2 years. And so we're talking multiple different meetings, multiple different flights, et cetera, with key stakeholders for the opportunity. And to make a long story short and fast forward, they ended up going with one of our competitors.
come
Um,
on, man.
and that happened outside of even the control of the folks that I was intimately talking to. Right? There was a relationship that happened. Again, relationship relationship, right, that happened with the executive leadership team of theirs. And then at the 25th hour, they were able to kind of swoop in and just kind of win them over off of that. But I was
Mm.
able to build enough of a rapport where, again, the transaction didn't go in our favor. But the relationships built so much so that, like, if I call you in 4 months when I know that this is not the right solution for you, just remember we're still here. This is how we would solve for what you're currently dealing with in 6 months, 9 months. That same thing is going to happen. And I will just be there as a resource, just like checking in for somebody's birthday or, hey, I just saw you got promoted and you're hitting them up on social media. That's how I follow up. And I just check in, see how things are going. And same thing happened in this situation where the transaction didn't go too well from a results perspective, but they felt so good about the process that they were like, hey, and I shared like, hey, because we had such a great relationship, unfortunately, it didn't go our way. But who else do you know that can benefit from a very similar experience? A similar experience in terms of asking you the right questions and also creating creative solutions that will help improve their situation. And so not only did that transaction not happen, but they also referred me to three other people. And all
Come
three
on.
of those opportunities ended up closing, which in aggregate was more than that initial deal in the first place. And so while I could be down in the dumps about the transaction and go through that emotional roller coaster as us all sellers do, right? And naturally. But I tried to kind of keep it as even keeled as possible and not be tied directly to the result of the transaction, but more about what I can control from a relationship perspective.
I absolutely love that. And it just goes back to show, like, it's such a simple concept, Carl, but like people, I'm gonna not speak generalized, like speak for myself, but I tend to overlook that because I'm looking further down the line towards like the steel closing or you know other things in the process, the disco, the demo, that I miss that simple thing of just building that authentic relationship. I know some people might be saying here, well, I want to get a tool that's going to help me. But forget about the tool. It's the tool is your ears, like you're
Yeah,
saying, and just and being you.
that's right.
Love it. Um, how do relationship help with closing? I think you had some examples here. How can that um, walk me through how how your relationships help you to be able to increase your close rate in your team?
Yeah. Again, I alluded to it earlier where it was like, setting up your champion to help drive the final point home as it relates to selling internally. And so really preparing them as much as you can on the front end with as much information as possible. And so on as far as how I lead and also teach my sellers to sell is that, hey, like before we walk away and they are in the decision making room, really scrutinize what you've shared and their understanding of what you've shared. Because there could easily be a miscommunication. I always say these days, the sale is made with percentage points. And if
Mm,
they don't have an understanding of the key message, the value prop, the ROI, whatever it is, and it's just a 1 degree off, then you might lose that opportunity. So it's really being authentic about listening to what they need and also preparing them for when I'm not in the room or we're not in the room. They're still advocating for what's right. And they know that it's right, not because of the name of our organization or even who I am, but really because we provided a solution for their true problem, not just to check off a box or get a sale. It's about really creating change for what they're looking for. And I feel like then when we do that, they advocate for us when we're not in the room. And that's usually the feedback. It was like, hey, we were able to kind of have this conversation. And then a lot of time, the executive leadership team will joke and say, hey, like they twisted my arm in the negotiating room. But it's not a negotiation tactic. It's just like, hey, they were prepared with all angles. And when they get asked the question, it's like, oh, I need to now go back to the vendor. No, no, no. I've already prepared them for that. They know what the answers are, where they can lift up stones and where the pitfalls are. And then at the end of the day, they're equipped with that information. And so, again, instead of having to come back to me and elongate the sales cycle, right there in the negotiating room in the executive leadership table, they're able to make that decision and share the information that will end up getting the transaction across the finish line.
how are you best providing them intel? Do you provide like scope of work, written information, videos? What are you doing besides that? That disco or that initial conversation to help arm them with the things that they need to be able to have those dialogues.
Yeah. Everybody's different, right? And so I
Yeah.
got to make sure that I have a suite of offerings at my disposal. If you're more of a video, audio type of person, then I have those guided demos. I have some talk tracks already pre-recorded for you to go ahead and navigate what you need. But if you're more, visual, there's one pagers, there's templates, there's all those things that I can give. So it really just depends on the person. And again, we discover that through discovery, of course. But once I understand who that person is, how they communicate, maybe it's text. And so there's a lot of people where like our relationship's not even in email. It's just like texting, FaceTime, things like that, which in the past, if I ever were to tell, my parents and their parents around like, hey, I'm now talking to these people that I'm like having transactions with on FaceTime and via text, they'd be like what? You know what I mean? Because it was like door to door, showing up in a
Oh my
suit
goodness.
in an office all the time and within these parameters or within these boxes. But the world is different, and as long as we can adapt to that, we're all good. So I try to be as adaptive as possible and make sure that I meet the needs of who I'm talking to.
Carl, you gave us a lot to think about today. Lot to know how we can show up authentically. Wrap it up in one sentence. Somebody's listening to this call, they're listening to this episode, and they're like, "Man, Carl, DK, that was some good stuff." But what's that one summation that can help them show up authentically?
Imagine there's a mirror in front of you at all times, right? And when you do that, you show up authentically. You tell yourself the truth, and there's no one else around to kind of skew that. And so, show up authentically means just being yourself, being there for who's in your life and in that transaction with you, and then that'll breed success in a major way.
Carl, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thanks
Thanks
for
so much
having
for
me.
your insights. We appreciate this. If folks want to get and connect with you or learn a little bit more about Fringe, how did they go about doing so?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me via email, carl@fringe.us. I'm on LinkedIn, Carl Sajous. Feel free to reach out to me there as well. And I'm always available for a conversation, some coaching, consulting, in whatever capacity in order to help the people that are in my circle. So feel free to reach out at any time. And DK, again, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Anytime, Mr. Authentic. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you got a chance to connect with Carl, man. I'm telling you, Fringe is a cool company as well. You can find information about them in the show notes. What I loved about this episode was just how Carl broke down the idea of listening, how that ties to back to building relationship and helping us to be truly authentic. I would love to hear your strategies on how you're applying authenticity. You can connect with myself and Carl on LinkedIn, Donald C. Kelly. Speaking about LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn prospecting course that I would love for you to join. I mean, this course is dynamite, not because I created it as well, because we've tested it, we've tried it, we've proved it with other clients, and it can prove it with you as well. It's a cohort-based training. So we have seats open for January. It would be an honor to have you and your sales team join the program. We have limited spots. Check it out. Go to salesevangelist.com and apply/LinkedIn. As always, I want you to thrive and succeed. I want you to raise your level of thinking. Most importantly, I want you to go out and do big things. Make some money in the process. See you in the next one.